This is Risky Women Radio, a show that connects, celebrates, and champions women in risk, regulation, and compliance. We're here to share the insights on the biggest issues in our industry and hear inspiring journeys from our global members. Sign up to our newsletter at riskywomen.org. I'm Kimberley Cole, your Chief Risky Woman. Welcome to Risky Women Radio. Today's Risky Women are Carol Beaumier, the Senior Managing Director of Protivity, and Bernadine Reese, Managing Director. Back to discuss our annual now podcast on the top of mind compliance issues. And this is our fourth year, so I'm super excited. Before I say hi and get them to and welcome them, I'll just give you a quick introduction. So, Bernadine is the Managing Director in Protivity's Risk and Compliance Practice. She is based in London and she joined Protivity in 2007 from KPMG's Regulatory Service Practice. She's got more than 30 years' experience working with a variety of financial services clients to enhance their business performance by successfully implementing risk, compliance, and governance change and optimizing their risk and compliance arrangements. And she's a frequent speaker on regulatory and risk issues, and we're thrilled to have her join us again today. Carol Beaumier is the Senior Managing Director in Protivity's Risk and Compliance Practice, and she also leads the firm's Global Thought Leadership Program. Prior to joining Protivity, Carol was a partner with Arthur Andersen, where she led the global regulatory practice. She was a founding member of the Secura Group and a leader of the firm's risk management practice, and a regulator with the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, which is a bureau of the US Treasury Department, where she served as Chief of Staff to the Comptroller. She's an experienced consultant. She's got more than 35 years of experience and extensive knowledge of financial crime, risk, and regulatory issues. She writes and speaks regularly on these issues and has worked globally across Americas, Europe, and the Asia Pacific region. So fabulous to have Carol on board. And I would also like to say she was one of our esteemed judging panel for our first Risky Women Rights competition this year. And the Risky Women Rights competition was really a great highlight for me and Risky Women in 2024. And so as I welcome you, maybe you can both say hi and also give me a little highlight of what was yours for 2024. So welcome, Carol. Welcome, Bernadine.
It's great to be back again with you, Kimberly. And I have to say, the writing contest was really the highlight of the year for me as well. You mentioned in the intro that one of my responsibilities is leading our Global Thought Leadership Program. And I think I probably mentioned to you in the past that if you asked me when I was in college what I wanted to do, I wanted to be a writer. So anything to do with writing, top of my list. And I think it was so much fun to see all of the risky women who contributed articles and just the range of topics and how invested they were in compliance as a profession, in kind of serving greater market needs. It just was a lot of fun to participate. I hope I'll get asked back in the future.
Yeah, I agree. It was amazing. Like we really were overwhelmed by the range and the quality and just the number of people that contributed. So can't wait to see what happens this year. And Bernadine, what about you? How was 2024 for you?
Really good, thank you, and lovely to be back, Kimberly, and to join you again. So yes, 2024 was a busy year. My highlight is probably a personal highlight. So I hosted a family gathering back in the UK. So my family is quite disparate across the globe. So we get together every few years. Last year was with us in the UK, and was fantastic to get together and reconnect. And it was a highlight for me.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, we're going to just have another quick little look back at 2024 before we move on to obviously our look forward in 2025 at the financial service industry's compliance priorities. And what was it in 2024 from a compliance related developments perspective that surprised you or perhaps caught you off guard a bit?
So if I can take that first, what caught me off guard a bit were three U.S. Supreme Court decisions that came toward the end of the last term of the Supreme Court. These decisions, in my mind, really have upended the regulatory process in the U.S. So two of the decisions related to responsibility and authority of the regulatory agencies versus the court. Effectively, they transferred to the court authorities that historically had belonged with the regulators. The biggest case, or the case that's gotten the most attention, is typically referred to as the Chevron reversal. And what it did was to reverse a 40-year-old Supreme Court decision, which said that, and this is the English language interpretation of the law, which said that where a law is vague or unclear, deference is given to the regulatory agencies to interpret intent. In reversing this decision, the court said interpreting law is the court's jurisdiction, not the regulatory agencies. As a consequence, we are already seeing other regulations being challenged based on this Supreme Court decision, and I expect it's something that we're going to see a lot more of in the future. It sounds US centric, but obviously it would affect any financial institution doing business in the US, so it has broader implications. And I think from an industry standpoint, it potentially really slows down and adds a degree of uncertainty to the rulemaking process.
Mm. Yeah, I think, that's going to be very interesting. And I'm curious to see how those kind of developments are going to shape the views for 2025. So, um, really keen to get into the current priorities. Do you want to add something,
Yeah,
Bernadine?
I was also going to choose a court ruling example from the UK this time, particularly looking at consumer protection issues, which we'll come to in a minute, but very hot topic here. And so the big surprise for me was the UK Court of Appeal stating that it's quite a specific point, but big implications. So a broker can't lawfully receive a discretionary commission from the lender without obtaining the customer's fully informed consent to that payment. So this was made in respect of a motor finance commission's ruling. But the way the court has interpreted it means that it covers a whole variety of commission arrangements, potentially past business review. So we are awaiting the Supreme Court appeal hearing in April with interest, because that could have far-reaching implications for the UK.
Wow. Yeah, really interesting again. Um, and then last year we looked at the developments and changes over 10 years because it was our 10th birthday and we did lots of good celebrations around that. And I think it's always good, and I think we did last year as well, to look at how your predictions went. So give us your thoughts on how did they actually play out?
So I think on balance, and I think we covered that, I know we covered this in our paper this year, they played out pretty well. I think we were on target. I think one of the issues that we've been a little bit hit and miss on, through no fault of our own, is kind of how the framework for crypto has developed around the globe. There have been kind of fits and starts. Um, we're projecting more activity in this year. I think also you asked us last year to kind of think forward and think about what the compliance world would look like in 10 years. And going back and looking at last year's discussion, my prediction was that I hoped within 10 years that compliance departments would have AI assistants that would do things like gather information for risk assessments and help with horizon scanning and help with compliance monitoring. And I think that's still a pretty good prediction, with the
Yeah.
exception that I'd shorten the timeline, because I think the advances in AI are just so dramatic that for the most part, we can do all of this already. Not everyone is there, but the capabilities exist. So I'm encouraged that in the future, a lot of the routine tasks will be done by AI, and that CCOs and compliance professionals can focus on strategy and being the expert advisors that their institutions need.
Yeah.
Excellent.
My
Anything to add,
predictions,
Bernadine? Or yeah.
yeah. So it was interesting to look back at my prediction. Um, I think mine is falling behind rather than speeding up. So my prediction was that there might be more. Well, I'd hope for more global alignment on regulations and greater sources of reliable data. To enable that kind of technology-rich, data-enabled approach as we progress on some of these issues. Doesn't feel like global alignment is improving from a regulatory perspective, but the demand for data is certainly there and increasing. And I think I'm going to double down on my prediction, because I think out of necessity we're going to get there in 10 years' time. So.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to now jumping ahead and looking at our 2025 priorities. So this year we love sharing the priority, the Protiviti's annual update, and I think this year you've titled it the Compliance Playbook: Navigating the Financial Services Industry's Compliance Priorities in 2025. So we'll put that link in the show notes and make sure that it's clear to everyone who wants to take a look. But it'd be great to have you walk us through some of the predictions and the priorities that you see. And you've kind of changed your approach a bit, I think, this year, identifying and grouping around regional views. So, why was that you decided to move that way?
I think that's a great follow up to the comments that Bernadine just made on global alignment. I think we were curious, and curiosity is a good thing for compliance professionals. But we were very curious about the extent to which disruption across the globe, whether that's disruption through innovation, through changing political views, changing populist views, we wanted to understand the extent to which that may be impacting priorities in different parts of the world. So we decided to come at this at using a little bit different lens than we had in the past, and I'm sure later we'll talk about what we learned from that.
Yeah. And what struck you most about the kind of responses? Because I think you went to your colleagues, as that was the sort of approach around the different geographies. And yeah, what struck you about the responses from them?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, we did go out to colleagues within regions, and perhaps not surprising that there was a high degree of overlap in the issues across the regions. Artificial intelligence topped most of the lists. Financial crime, operational resilience, third-party risk management were up there too for, I think, all of the regions. Just reflecting those international regulatory priorities and the need to address the impact of technology on financial services and so on. But there were some unique issues by region as well. So we'll no doubt come to the heightened uncertainty being a big priority from a US perspective in North America. In Europe, ESG and virtual asset regulation featured highly. And in APAC, there was a strong focus on conduct and culture as well as fintech. So there were those regional discrepancies and variations as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, AI, I'd say, is the top of the list for, pick an industry, pick a pick a topic. But it's very interesting to think about it in the context of compliance and risk. So yeah, very, very interesting. So Bernadine, you noted AI. it's a common one as well across the globe. And as I said, I think across multiple industries. So what do you see then specifically as the sort of key compliance priorities related to AI, and what's the sort of chief compliance office should be doing to address them?
Yeah, I mean the speed of change with the launch, I guess, really for a lot of people, the launch of Chat GPT and those kind of Gen AI models has meant that we've had this kind of widespread development globally on adoption of AI. I think fair to say regulators are still playing catch up in this area, but compliance teams are having to navigate AI adoption in the business. Most people are pressing ahead with some sort of AI adoption. So what we're seeing is compliance priorities focusing on areas like fairness, privacy, safety, transparency, competition, accountability. There's a long list of compliance issues to think through. And globally, regulators are looking to align around international standards and principles. I think we see organizations like the OECD looking at respect for human rights, sustainability, risk management, but a rule set it is still, I guess, some way to go in relation to AI. So chief compliance officers are going to be trying to navigate this emerging local and global regulations as they assess the compliance risks from AI being developed by their own businesses or indeed within the compliance teams that they're running. It's a challenge.
I I think it's interesting because it sort of relates again to some of the conversations we've had previously around scope and how the role continues to gain more and more scope when you're saying now all of those areas that you named, but it's also the AI impacts around those. So it just once again shows the sort of breadth as well as the depth of the role. This episode is brought to you by Protivity. Protivity is a global consulting firm with deep expertise in transformation, risk management, and compliance. Partner with Protivity. So maybe Carol, obviously there was a lot of other common priorities as Bernadine just said, from financial crime, security, privacy, operational resilience, your third party risk management. I mean, a lot of them come up regularly every year. But are there any kind of unique considerations for compliance organizations to think about this year?
I think there are a few things to keep in mind as it relates to fin crime. So, just recently, the EU ministers appointed a veteran Italian central banker to lead the new anti money laundering authority for the EU. So, I think it will be important to watch how her agenda evolves. Obviously, it will have significance not only for EU financial institutions, but other institutions that do business in the EU. In the US, and this kind of gets back to the role of the courts, many people are likely aware that our beneficial owner corporate registry, which was supposed to go into effect in January, has been caught up in the courts, kind of on again, off again. As we record this morning, it's on, but we'll see. So definitely something to keep an eye out on for those who do business in the US. I think another important issue in the fin crime space is around sanctions. And export controls. I would expect this year to be another very active year. I think what the industry really needs to keep an eye on is, and we've come through this period where we've had tremendous coordination and collaboration among the US, the UK, and EU in particular. In the new US administration, I think there may be a tendency to act unilaterally and then maybe try to get other countries to go along. The consequence to the industry is that I think we could end up with more kind of mismatches in the way we're approaching sanctions, what parties are involved, and obviously that creates much bigger challenges for those institutions that operate multinationally. And I would say another fin crime area to keep an eye on is fraud. I mean, fraud to me is really interesting because I think it's the one area where everyone, the regulators, the institutions, consumers agree that more needs to be done. So we're seeing just tremendous activity around the space. And I would say payments in particular seem to be a huge area of focus. So definitely things to watch there. And then when I look at security and privacy, ops resilience, third party risk management, to me, they're all very intertwined. You know, to, to some extent, if we think about cyber risk, it's inevitable. And I think the innovation that we're seeing on the AI and quantum side, while they have definite benefits, they're also exacerbating the risk in this space. So I would expect these to be, on the list for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so much going on there. Really interesting. I meant to ask when you said before, Bernadine, that the regulators are playing catch up on AI. Who's leading, do you think?
That's a really difficult one. I think we've seen the EU AI Act come out. We've seen the full text of that and the approach. I suspect that's seen as a bit of a lead in the markets. They're adopting a very much a risk-based, risk-driven approach to AI regulation. But at the moment, we're seeing lots of different governments picking up different aspects of AI regulation. It's also an area that's regulated not only by financial services, but actually primarily by other regulators, with financial services having to fit in as well. So it's going to be an area that develops for quite a while, I'm sure.
Yeah, interesting. And then one of the other areas that'd be interesting for you to comment on, Bernadine, is around resourcing, which I know you highlight in the report. How can the industry make progress on the resourcing issue?
Yeah, very, very topical at the moment with clients. So they find that recruiting and retaining compliance talent is a real challenge in the current market. We've seen firms making progress by making better use of technology and outsourcing or co-sourcing some tasks that are more people intensive to allow the experienced compliance team to really focus on strategy and decision making and business partnering and those types of things. And I think compliance teams have also had success bringing in talent from non-traditional backgrounds, people who have an interest in compliance and see that as a career that they're really interested in following.
Interesting. Yeah, I thought it was also you were talking about resourcing in the report, and you were talking about optimization, and through sort of four lenses that you said that you should be looking at: effectiveness, efficiency, sustainability, and creating a competitive edge. And that sometimes there's cuts in resourcing that really create quite a big impact. Yeah, so I really liked that approach, and especially obviously the competitive edge piece, because I think that gets lost a lot on the compliance side.
Yeah, absolutely does. Those short term changes, sometimes those budgetary constraints can have a really long term impact on compliance, and affect the business as well. So it's definitely one to consider.
Yeah, absolutely, and good to think about it across those different viewpoints when companies are thinking about their resourcing and what that really means. So let's transition and talk about some of the unique regional challenges that you identified, because as much as we've talked about all the similarities, there were some differences. And Bernadine, ESG was identified as a priority in Europe, but not in other regions, which is very curious. So can you elaborate on that?
Yes, it was a bit of a surprise, I guess. I think from a European perspective, ESG was very high on the priority list. partly because of the package of legislative changes being brought in by the European Union relating to the development of the sustainable finance market and far-reaching pieces around disclosures and reporting and so on. That's all very active and front of mind for our clients at the moment. So we really see that focus in Europe. In the UK as well, we're seeing growing momentum behind the implementation of some of those initiatives now, in order to encourage the growth of a sustainable finance market within financial services.
Well, it's good that it's on high on the agenda somewhere, I think. So, Carol, you talked about the US Supreme Court decisions as surprising developments in 2024. Are they the root of the heightened uncertainty that you've identified for North America, or are there other things that are part of that story?
They're definitely part of it. There's another part of that story, and that is, as everyone knows, we have a new administration, and new administrations always bring with them change. I think it's fair to say that the financial services industry is actually quite optimistic that there'll be some regulatory relief, that there'll be a lighter touch on enforcement, that we will finally have a crypto framework in the US. So they're looking forward to a lot of the change, but I think we have the inevitable reality that change doesn't happen overnight. And even if everything is seemingly moving in the right direction, change itself brings challenges to institutions, and it will take some time for all of this to be put into place. So I think for us in the US and anybody that does business in the US, that definitely adds to the uncertainty in this year.
I think that the crypto framework is going to be an interesting one for us to keep an eye on, and maybe that'll be a good one to check back in on our next update. And then you close out the paper by highlighting the importance of horizon scanning, which I thought was really interesting. You've addressed it previously, but you referenced a speech by former member of the board of the European Central Bank and the New York State Department of Financial Services Superintendent Elizabeth McCall, and she talked about horizon scanning using an analogy to vision. Can you explain that analogy? And I thought it was a very interesting approach.
Yeah, Carol and I both really like this analogy, and it seems very fitting for that horizon scanning process that most compliance officers are doing on a very frequent basis. So, her analogy is that when identifying risks, if you think of firstly central vision, so what's right in front of us right now, the risks of which we're all aware. That's the core of it. And most of the compliance priorities that we mentioned in the report and that we have on our list are examples of those central vision. Secondly, there's fringe vision, which are those issues which are just outside the central vision, changes that we see developing and beginning to have an impact, but not quite there yet in terms of a real focus. And then finally, peripheral vision, which is that much wider risk landscape. And that includes structural trends, for example, that could have a profound impact on business models and the financial services industry. And normally we would say peripheral vision, things that are in peripheral vision might take quite a few years to come through to central vision. But the speed of some of those changes now, we see AI, for example, 2 or 3 years ago, would have been really on peripheral vision and has now rapidly moved into central vision. So these things do change and change really quickly as well.
Yeah, very interesting. So quite a good model or structure for your customers and people to sort of use when they're thinking through their plans. So we covered a lot there, and I think there's still more in the report that people could dig into. And so just a reminder to everyone that the full report is available online, and we will give the link to everybody. But it's worth having a read to get into a bit more of the detail on those areas. So maybe I think we've covered the key points anyway, but everyone can take a look and see if there was other things that, stand out for them. But maybe as a final question, if I can get from both of you, if the compliance departments could do just 3 things in 2025 to improve their effectiveness, what would you suggest they do? So, Carol, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. So, expecting that you might ask a question like this, I actually asked this question of our proprietary AI chatbot.
Oh,
And
fantastic.
then I tweaked the answers because we still need a human in the loop. But our chatbot suggested that the 3 most impactful things that compliance departments could do would be to continue leveraging technology, including AI and advanced analytics. The second
So it was selling itself.
was, yes, it was selling itself quite well. I think it made it number 1, yes. The second point was just ongoing training and awareness, just in recognition that we have so much going on that, keeping not only the compliance department itself up to speed, but the organization at large is a full-time commitment. And the last was around risk assessment. And I think this is a topic we've talked about in the past too, just the continual need to kind of move to more dynamic risk assessment, not look back, but dynamic, and really provide data-driven insights that can inform decision making. So I thought the chatbot did a pretty decent job.
Yeah. Not too bad. And Bernadine, what was your personal view, or did you also go to a different
No.
a different LLM and see if you got a different result?
No, these are personal reflections. So I wish I'd thought of using more of an AI model. There you go. I would say focus on outcomes rather than processes. We often see compliance teams become very caught up in a process view of the world, but actually sometimes it's the outcomes that matter the most. Thinking about resourcing, that point about outsourcing the low value activities and focusing on real areas of compliance value add, I think is important. And then building an organizational culture so that compliance has a valued seat at the table. Perhaps the hardest to do, but would certainly be the one that could make a biggest impact and difference for compliance teams.
Okay, well, that's still a lot for those compliance teams to do between those 6 things. So, really good recommendations, but obviously very big, chunky activities in their own right. So, thank you both, though, for sharing all of that. I think that's a brilliant, kickoff to our 2025 year ahead, and some very interesting thoughts, predictions, and things for people to actually put into process, I think. So thank you both. And I'm super excited that we're going to be back in the middle of the year, given the rate of change that we're seeing, given as you said, the uncertainty and several of the other things that we do see on the horizon. I think it'll be really good to have a mid-year check-in. And so everyone should watch out for that, and it'll be really good. We're continuing, just updates from Risky Women. We're continuing our Women to Watch series in 2025. So we'll have a big list coming out for International Women's Day in March this year. So everyone should watch out for that. And we continue to add new activities to the repertoire all the time. We have Rev Up sessions, which we hold one per month. For members, they're part of your membership, and all of the Rev Up sessions, but anyone can join. And the Rev Up sessions are aimed at what I say, building on our already incredible superpowers. So lots of good things that are coming up there. So watch out for those, and go to our Risky Women website, riskywomen.org, and sign up for the Raw newsletter so that all of the listeners don't miss a thing, and they can hear about all the events, the most recent podcasts, and everything else that's going on in the network. And take a moment to subscribe to this podcast on whichever channel is your preferred, and give us a 5-star rating and a comment too. That would be absolutely brilliant. But thank you, Carol, and thank you, Bernadine. It's been another fabulous discussion.
Thank you. Great fun to be back with you again. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And see you mid-year. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of Risky Women Radio. Be part of the ongoing conversation and learn more about our events and other programs at riskywomen.org.